Alright, so in this new video we're going to be going over the UI. Now I'm going to need a couple things from here. So we'll go to View and we'll click Explorer and Properties. And I'm going to close these two windows. We don't need them. We do need Toolbox for a brief moment, and that's what I'm going to go over as the first thing. In here you have your models, or what is otherwise known as free models, and you can pretty much click and drag these into the workspace, and there you go. You'll have it in the workspace. You can select it, duplicate it by clicking duplicate up here and drag it around. We'll just click delete on our keyboard to delete that, or you can right click and click delete. And if we look right here, you can also see that it gives you the shortcuts for each little selection here. Now, here we have our select tool. Here we have our move tool. Here you can move a part. Here you can scale it. Here you can rotate it. Now, collisions, very briefly, you don't need it at all, but just so you know what it does is if we duplicate this part here, it will duplicate at the same exact spot as the original part. If we tick collisions on and we duplicate by right-clicking or clicking up here, or hitting, as we see here, Control D, it will spawn on top of the part. Or if it's a model, it will spawn on top of the model. Generally, if you're doing advanced building or even just general building, I highly do not recommend having collisions on. It doesn't do anything for you. It actually makes things worse in some conditions. So we'll just delete that and we'll turn it off. Here you can find the editor, which mine is a little weird because it spawns up there. But here you can generate terrain, import terrain, or clear terrain. And here you have different options for doing certain things. You can add different terrain. And that's always cool. So we'll just clear that and clear all terrain. And we'll close that. Here you can access your toolbox, so if you accidentally close it, you can always find it here. And you can also find it in view. But we'll just close that for the time being. Actually, real quickly, here you can find your models, and here you can find your recent models. You can also click this to go to images, meshes, audio, or plugins, and same thing with your own stuff. Here you can also find group stuff as well. And that's basically it for the toolbox. Aside from this, if you see a model with this yellow-orange shield, it means it's a high quality model and it's been approved by Roblox. Only Roblox can approve these models, so this means that they're virus free and they're not going to do anything harmful to your game. So that's always a good reminder. And moving on. Here you can import a different block, sphere, wedge, or cylinder. That's always nice. And here you can change the material of a part. So if we select this part and hit F, we can then change its material, say to wood planks. And then we can also change its color to something like that. Now, the anchor tool is very useful. Basically, what the anchor tool does is it keeps your object in place instead of falling freely. So if we click here and we hit run, while our part is unanchored, it'll simply fall to the ground. And if there's nothing below this part, it'll simply fall off the map and disappear. So we'll click stop here, and if we click run again and we anchor that, you'll see that it stays in place no matter what we do. And if we click unanchor, it'll simply fall back down. Now keep in mind that when you're in any of these three modes and you make a change to your game, it will not make any changes to the studio. So if you make any changes in there, do not expect it to save whatsoever. Because if we click run and we duplicate this part and we move it up here and we color it blue and we hit stop, it will not apply those changes to our actual save game. So just keep that in mind. Any changes you make in the viewport when you're test playing or test running will not save. So don't make anything you expect to keep. Here we have our lock tool where we can lock this part, which means we won't be able to select it. Even if we click and drag, we won't be able to select it. Here we can hit unlock all. That will unlock everything. So now we can select our base plate, our part again, but I'll just lock the base plate again, go back to select. Now here is the group and ungroup. This means that if you have a part and we'll hit Control D and we say color this blue and we decide to, by the way, control and click these, we decide to group these. That means now if we select one, they'll both be selected and we can move them at the same time. And there you go. So we'll just ungroup that for now. Game settings. Normally when you upload a game, you'll get this window. But if you've already uploaded a game, you can also click this to change the name of it, the description, who can play it. You can change the game icon, the screenshots and videos, the genre, what devices it's playable on, and you can also change different things about the avatar. This is more for scripting, so I wouldn't really touch this unless you know what you're doing. Not that it would really harm your game if you enabled any of this anyway, but still. And you can change the gravity, jump height, walk speed, and slope angle, and that sort of stuff. Slope angle basically means the maximum slope your character will be able to walk on. So if it's more than that number, your character will simply slide down the slope. Kind of like those old games where if the developers didn't want you going into a certain area, they would make you slide down a spiral. I'm looking at you, Scooby-Doo. So we'll hit cancel there and we'll go over to model. In model, we'll simply find the same tools here. We'll find collisions, but here you can set the moving studs and the rotation. So if we change this to, if we go to rotate and we see here, it'll show us the lines to which we can move to. And if we switch that to say 5, for example, now you'll see that we have smaller increments. So there you go. If we look at, where was I? There we are. Here you can move by 0.5 studs, but if you change that to, let's say, 5 studs, then you'll move by 5. And there you go. Again, you can import different parts, you can change the material and color. Here you can union and negate, so we'll change this back to 0.5. Now union, negating, and separating is pretty simple, and it's pretty simple to understand. If we move this part into another part, and let's say we choose to union it, then these two parts will be joined together. If we want to reverse that, we can hit separate, and it will now separate those two parts. If we want to make one part cut a hole into the other one, so for example, we can make this negate, and then we can keep this part the same, click both of these and hit union, and now that part will cut into this other part. And if we want to undo that, we can click separate. Now the thing to note is that if you plan to union two parts together, if you try to change the color, it won't change. And if you decide that you want to change the material, you can only change the material as a whole. Once you union it, you cannot change the material for this part to say neon and then have this part as wooden planks. You can only have them as one material. And if you want to recolor it, you have to go into the properties tab and use part color, in which case it'll use only one color. And if you untick that, it'll go back to the original. So if you want two different parts to have two different colors, then you have to paint them before you union them. Otherwise, you cannot change their individual color, unfortunately. So we'll just separate that and we'll delete that, I mean. Now, all of this other stuff is pretty much, this stuff I wouldn't touch. I have no idea what it does. Here, if we select this part and go back to model, we can insert certain effects like sparkles or fire, and that's sort of cool. Here, we can import a spawn point. So to demonstrate this really quickly, if we move this to the corner of the map, like so, if we hit play by going back to home and we click play, you will spawn on the spawn. You will spawn on the spawn. You will spawn wherever you put the spawn location. However, if you decide that you don't want to spawn somewhere, you can also click play here. It's habit to go to test, but you can basically go to home or test, and you will spawn wherever your camera is, and you will spawn in the direction your camera is facing. So if we're facing this way, and we double click that, we will spawn where the camera is, and we will spawn facing the direction of the camera. If you just want to run the game and, you know, see how a block falls, but you don't want to spawn in your character, you can always just click run, and it'll just run the game, but it won't spawn your character in. Now let's say you don't have a spawn and you click play. You will simply spawn in the center of the map at 000, and it will do that all the time. Moving on, if we click advanced objects, we'll get a list of a bunch of objects which are useful. Here you can see a force field, fire, folder, model, mesh part, that sort of thing. So if you're struggling to find something, most likely you can find it here. If we go back to model, if we go to this means you can import a file from local files. Import a model from local files. If you click this, it'll open up your file explorer. I don't know what it's called for Apple because I've never used a Mac in my life. It'll open up your file explorer, and if you have a Roblox file on your computer, you will be able to insert it into this thing. If you want to export a file, export a model, you would simply right click in Explorer and you would click Save to File. Export selection means to export as a mesh, but we'll go over that in a later video, or you can just look it up anywhere on Roblox really, but you can save to file or save to Roblox. And if you save to Roblox, it'll appear in your toolbox under My Models. So that's just something to keep in mind. Here we have service, collision groups, and all this other stuff. This is mainly for scripters, so we'll skip over that. Test, we already know what test does, but here you can emulate a device like a Samsung Galaxy, and this is how it'll look on a Samsung Galaxy. We can go to actual resolution and see what it would look like, or physical size. And there you go. You can probably even get a Samsung Galaxy and put it up to your screen, although it might look a little bigger, or a little smaller than the physical size here. So we'll just go back to test and we'll click off of that. I don't know what any of this does actually. Here you can mute the studio sound, so you don't have to hear sounds from, studio. Here we can go to view. And we're going to take off the command bar because again, that's for scripters. And it just takes up more space on the screen that we don't really need. Here you can find the Explorer and properties again. And a lot of the stuff that we opened in home and models, or mainly in models, you can find here. Such as the toolbox, you can also find the Game Explorer, and you can find a few other things like the view selector, which is also very useful. And actually, I guess I was wrong. You can't find a lot of this stuff from over here, but you can find quite a few things. And that is basically that. You can also find the terrain editor as well. And here's Team Create, but we'll go over Team Create in a later video. So going over that, we now have our plugins tab. This is where you'll find all your plugins, but I'll go over that in another video. I believe the next video actually. So we'll just click out of that. We don't need this anymore. And now we're going to go to here. Now we're only going to cover the workspace, the lighting, server storage, and starter pack. Everything else is kind of irrelevant if you're just building. It is totally irrelevant, everything else. So in workspace is pretty much everything you see, except for the sky. The sky and the lights is in lighting. But everything you see block-wise is in workspace. So if you see something in the workspace, you'll find it here. Excuse me. Here in the workspace, you can change the fallen parts destroy height. So if a model or part, which is unanchored, falls down, that is the height below a certain point that it will be destroyed. And there are a few other things like gravity, streaming enabled, which you can change here. Streaming enabled is essentially if you have a big game, a big map with a lot of detail or a lot of parts, you can enable streaming enabled. And I guess an easy example would be Minecraft. Say you're flying through Minecraft at a super speed and you see chunks loading in. That's basically what streaming enabled is. So if you move to a new part of the map, the old part of the map you were just at will unload, and the part you're in now that's just loaded in will be the new part loaded in. And that's how Minecraft and games, pretty much every game actually, is able to run on your computer because not everything is loaded in at once. That's basically what streaming enabled is. Otherwise, if you don't have that on and you have a big game with a lot of parts in it, the way Roblox works without it is that it will keep everything loaded in at all times, and that's not very performance friendly, both for you and the user playing the game. So here we'll go to terrain, and here you can change watercolor, reflectance, transparency, and wave size. Here you can also change material colors. The only material I wouldn't recommend changing is the rock material, because any other color, it'll make it purple for some reason. Decoration is better explained if I go to the editor. Well, as demonstrated, we'll just add in some grass. That way you know what I'm talking about. If we hit decoration, it will load in 3D grass, which is very cool. Again, if we wanted to change the material, we can change it to, say you're making an alien planet, you can change it to a purple or blue, which looks cool. So we'll go out of that and we'll just get rid of that by hitting Control Z. If you want to undo something, you hit Control Z. If you want to redo something, you hit Control Shift Z. Control Z, Control Shift Z. Or you can click up here like so. Sorry for not going over that sooner. Now, if we go to our lighting, here we can change the ambient. So we can change this to red. And I'll go very slowly for anyone who has, I forget the term, the medical term, but it's basically when you have a seizure from seeing colors changing to, like strobe lights, basically. And so that's basically that. You can also change the brightness here. And these two, generally, I have no idea what they do. I really see no difference in them, so I would totally ignore them. Now, global shadows. Let's say you're working in a dark environment, or you're just trying to, well, in a dark environment. You would click global shadows, and it will turn off all shadows. That way you can see wherever you're working, and you don't have to have a light on you at all times. So we'll just tick that back on. Legacy outlines will basically add an outline to your parts. It's kind of hard to see here, but there's an outline there if we pay attention. But you don't really, here I'll just move this up so you can see it better. Lighting, legacy outlines, but you don't really need it. And if it's your first time building, or even your 100th time building, and you want to keep it on, then you can have it on. Just remember that when you activate your game, to turn it off, unless that's sort of the theme of your game outlines. But just keep in mind it actually makes your game lag more, so I would turn it off. Outdoor ambient is pretty much the same as the other one. It'll change the outdoor ambient. Here you find your technology. If we move this up and we scale, I'll be able to demonstrate what each technology does. So right now this is the voxel technology. Compatibility is the old Roblox lighting. And if we go to shadow map, then the shadows will become more realistic. After you change the shadow map, you'll see that now you have shadow softness, and you can make it really soft or really sharp, like so. Here you can change the clock time, so we can make this 12, we can make this 8, and so on. We can even make it nighttime, and now you will have stars. Here you can change geographical latitude. Generally, I wouldn't change this. Here you can also get a more precise time of day, because up here you mainly go for the first 2 digits of the time in military time. Here you can change it to 1430 or something like that. Now, really quickly, because I want to demonstrate how the sky works, we'll get a skybox really quickly to demonstrate. And we'll import this skybox. If we want to change the star count, we can do it by doing this. Now there's no stars. Now there's only 5 stars. Very minimal. And we can change this to 5,000 even. And we'll just delete that because, you know, that's irrelevant. So here we'll change this back to 14, the default. And here we can change the exposure compensation. We can make the game super dark or extremely bright. And I'll change that to 0. Here we can change the fog color, fog end, fog start, and we'll just change this to orange-ish, yellow, orange. Now to demonstrate this, we'll make this 300, and the fog starts at wherever the player is if it's set to 0, and it'll end about 300 out. However, if we change the fog start to 100, you'll see that it starts and ends at the same place. If we change this to 50, you'll see that it starts here and it ends there. So if we go to 90, you'll see that it starts here and ends there. Hopefully that's clear enough. Now, server storage is, say you have something you want to store away, but you don't want to delete from the workspace. You just want to store it away. The most common thing I could think of for this reasoning is that you have either a backup model, or say you have a public game or you have decorations for Christmas, Easter, that sort of thing, and you want to use them next year, but you want to store them away. And also, models in here cannot be stolen by exploiters. You can click and drag to server storage, and it will be hidden away. You can also click and drag to workspace to put it back, and there you go. And that's basically what server storage does. Now, starter pack. If we go to home and we go to toolbox, and we say search for sword, the first result will be by Roblox, and it'll be the default sword. And if we want this to just spawn in the workspace, we can click no. But if we want this to automatically be put in the starter pack, we can click yes, and it will now be put in the starter pack. When we click play now, we will spawn with the sword in our toolbox, or in our toolbar, and we'll be able to use that sword. Each time a player spawns in the game, even if they get eliminated or die, they will be spawned with that item. And that's basically all there is to know about this UI thing. The next video I'm going to be going over plugins. I'm going to go over how to install one plugin, but in reality I'm going to link 2 plugins depending on which one you want to use. And after that, like I said, all the videos after that will be just short clips of how to do certain techniques. So I'm BuilderOwl, thanks for watching, and goodbye. Right, before you go, this is just a really quick addition to video number 2, which you're just watching. If we go to any of these down here, we'll see the properties. So if we go to our part, we can see brick color. We can also get a more precise or different color here. We can also change the material from here. We can also change its reflectance or its transparency. We can also change its name, its orientation, its position, whether it's anchored or not anchored, whether it can be collidable or non-collidable, whether it's locked or unlocked, whether it has no weight or if it does. Here you can change the shape, the size, and custom physical properties such as these. And that is basically it. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. I'm BuilderOwl. Goodbye.